Welcome. My name is Dr. Lori Bruce. I'm a clinical psychologist and mindfulness coach, and this is From Both Sides of the Couch. In this podcast, I will be sharing with you ideas, strategies, and nuggets of wisdom from my 25 years of experience as a therapist and as a client in my own therapy. I am passionate about helping the helpers, those of us who are caregivers, either by profession or in our personal lives. Join me as we explore topics such as building resilience, self-care and self-acceptance, reducing stress, anxiety, and guilt, and how to live the happiest and most fulfilling life possible. Let's get started. Welcome to From Both Sides of the Couch. I'm Dr. Lori Bruce. Last year, when this podcast was called Inner Healing Intelligence, I started a series on the hidden gifts of our emotions. And in this episode, I talked about the value of our emotions, even painful ones, including fear, anger, anxiety, and guilt. I reviewed the value of experiencing fear and how fear teaches us to pay attention to something that needs fixing in our lives. At that time, I had planned on doing a series of 4 episodes, but I got temporarily derailed. But interestingly, that episode has been my most listened to episode so far. And so this tells me that this is an important topic, and so I decided to return to and complete the series. So today I'm going to talk about the hidden gifts that anger can bring us, and in the next 2 episodes, I'll cover the hidden gifts of sadness and the hidden gifts of guilt and shame. Let's start by talking about the nature of anger. What is anger? Anger is the emotion we feel when someone or something is blocking us from getting what we want, or what we feel we need, or what we feel we deserve. We feel angry when we or someone we care about is being attacked or threatened. And we feel angry when things don't turn out the way we think they should. What are the types of thoughts that we might have when we are angry? When we're angry, we might be thinking it's not fair or it shouldn't be this way. We might find ourselves blaming someone else for causing us harm or for preventing us from getting what we want. Angry thoughts are usually very rigid and fixed. You'll notice that when you're feeling really angry about something and someone else tries to tell you to think about it differently or that your thoughts are not valid, it only makes you even more angry. The angrier we are, the more fixed and rigid our thoughts are likely to be. Where do you feel anger in your body? For me, I tend to feel anger in my chest, and it feels almost like a burning sensation. And I also might feel this sensation in my throat. I notice that I tend to clench my jaw and my fists when I'm angry. Everyone feels their feelings differently, so just because I feel anger this way doesn't mean that that's how you feel. You might feel anger in your head. You might notice it in your stomach. There's no right way to feel any emotion. A very frustrating component of my anger is that when I am incredibly angry, I start to cry. And people usually connect crying with sadness. And of course, I cry when I'm sad. However, I also, for whatever reason, cry when I am enraged. And for me, this is very frustrating because it's very difficult for me to contain my tears. And I often don't want to cry or I'm in a situation where it's really best for me not to cry, like at work, for example. I personally have this thing about crying at work. You know, in the movie A League of Their Own, where Tom Hanks says, "There's no crying in baseball." That's how I feel about work. There's no crying at work. And so that will pop into my head when I feel like I'm going to cry at work. You're not allowed to do that. It's interesting because I've heard other women say the same thing, but I'm really not sure if I've ever heard a man say that they cry when they get angry. So I think it's interesting and wonder how much of this is just our gender training. There are also other urges that you might have when you feel angry in addition to or instead of crying. Many of us have an urge to attack, to retaliate, or to fight back when we feel angry. Anger tends to be energizing, whereas sadness might lead you to have an urge to do nothing. Often anger has the opposite effect. It gives you the strong urge to right the wrong in the situation. And this is particularly hard when there isn't anything that you can do to change the situation. Honestly, I think that is when anger is the hardest, when your needs or your wishes are being blocked and you feel powerless to do anything about it. Other people might notice that when they feel angry, they want to run away. They want to get out of the situation as quickly as possible. That also might mean that there is a fear emotion that is secondary to the anger. If you feel angry, but then you are afraid of your own experience of anger, that fear might be what is driving you to run away from this situation. I believe that the urges you feel when you have an emotion is connected to what we learned about this emotion when we were younger. If, for example, you were punished in some way for expressing anger, then it makes sense you might be fearful of your own anger or try to avoid experiences that make you angry. The opposite might actually also be true. Imagine a child who feels ignored or invisible when they're calmly asking for something, and then the only way they can get their needs met is through throwing a tantrum or expressing their anger really loudly. What might this child learn about anger? They might actually grow up to get angry and to express anger at really small things in order to quickly get their needs met. This might lead to frequent displays of anger that might feel out of control. Notice how anger, just like all emotions, has a wide range of intensities. We can think of irritation or annoyance as very mild forms of anger, and rage as being a severe form of anger. They're all based on the same underlying situation. Our needs are being blocked, but the intensity varies. Sometimes we can even have a very chronic, low level of an emotion totally outside of our awareness. If you were feeling rage, for example, you would likely be very aware of when that is happening. It's intense, and there's no doubt from you or others when you are feeling enraged. But think about bitterness. Notice how we can be low-key bitter for days, months, or even years without even knowing it. Bitterness can become a way of looking at the world, as if you only notice the times when things are unfair, rather than all the times in which things turned out well. Chronic bitterness can lead you to inadvertently push people away. People can get tired of someone who's always so negative and resentful. Of course, occasionally feeling bitter or resentful is part of life, and we certainly want to be there for our friends, especially if they're going through a rough time. But chronic, meaning never-ending bitterness and negativity, it eventually wears thin with people, and people eventually feel like they're just not enjoying your company. So, how can anger possibly be helpful? What does this mean that anger could be a gift? If anger makes you have these rigid thoughts, if it gives you urges to punish people, get back at people, if it leads you to unconsciously push people away from you, how could this possibly be a good thing? Think for a moment about what anger is trying to tell you. If you didn't feel the emotion of anger, what would your life be like? If someone were able to steal your money or your prized possessions and you just didn't care, wouldn't that set up your life for people to take advantage of you? Your anger about these things are what indicates to you that something is wrong, something is not okay. It's not okay for someone to steal your things, and your anger about that signals to you to try to fix the situation. Without the emotion of anger, we would never fix anything that was wrong. We would allow all sorts of terrible things to happen to ourselves and to the ones we love. On a societal level, anger is what drives us to fight for equal rights. Think about the women that felt anger when they were denied their right to vote or to own their own money or their own property. If those women of our past didn't feel angry about it, we would not have these rights and freedoms today. Anger helps us fight for women's rights, children's rights, minorities' rights, and anyone who has less power and is striving for equal treatment. So how do we use anger effectively? One of the most important steps is to recognize when you're feeling angry. I have a lot of patients who don't realize that what they are actually feeling is anger. They think that they're sad or they're anxious, but not angry. And although the feelings may be similar, they're actually quite different in terms of the underlying beliefs. I have found that oftentimes women have more difficulty identifying their own anger because we are socialized more than men not to express our anger. Society seems to tolerate a man getting angry about something and verbalizing that. But when a woman does it, she might be called certain specific names, or she might be judged. Many of us have learned to grit our teeth when we're mad and purposefully not express it. When you are noticing any emotion in your body and you feel the urge to retaliate or to fight, ask yourself, am I feeling angry right now? What is it that I want that I feel I'm unable to obtain? Maybe your wish is just to be at peace. Maybe you want to feel seen or heard. When someone invalidates us, we're likely to feel angry about that because our need to be understood is being blocked. The more aware we are that we're angry, the more we are able to begin to problem solve to fix the situation. Many situations are fixable. We can express to someone, I feel angry when you ignore me that way. Or I feel frustrated that I keep making the same request from you and you don't seem to be taking it seriously. We can explain the consequences of their actions. For example, if you can't adhere to this limit that I have set, then I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Just because our initial desire has been blocked, it doesn't mean that there's nothing we can do about it. Anger drives us to see that there is a problem and then to begin problem solving to see if we can fix the situation. One thing to know about anger, just like fear, is that when our body is in threat mode or fight or flight, less oxygen and blood is going to our brain. So we are more likely to be impulsive and to not think through our impulses or urges. This is why we say or do things when we are enraged that we are much less likely to ever consider doing when we're calm. Use your awareness of your own anger to validate yourself. That might look like, I have a right to feel angry about this. Or, of course I feel mad about this. If this is hard for you to do, think about how you might validate your best friend. Ideally, you would not tell your best friend, hey, don't feel that way. See if you can validate yourself the way you would with others. Just by validating yourself, you might notice your nervous system calming down. If not, take a few minutes out of whatever situation you are in to see if you can steady yourself. You can practice slow breathing or paced breathing. Take a walk to burn off some of that energy. And when you're calmer physiologically, then you might feel ready to problem solve. Do not attempt to problem solve when you are enraged. It just won't work. You have to get your emotions down to at least a 5 out of 10 before you can start thinking about how you're going to solve the problem. What do we do, however, when we're feeling angry about something and it cannot be solved or fixed? Maybe someone betrayed you and there's no going back in time to undo it. What then? Anger can help motivate you to make decisions about that relationship and future relationships. Maybe you'll be more cautious with people. Maybe you'll decide to cut off contact with that person. Or maybe you'll decide to start thinking about forgiveness. The main skill to use when you feel angry about something that you cannot control is something that I talk a lot about, which is the concept of radical acceptance. I do not have to like it or agree with it, but it is my reality now. I can let go of my need for it to be different than it is because there's nothing I can do to make it different. I can only accept my new reality and learn how to live within that new reality. If you find yourself with low levels of chronic anger, such as bitterness, resentment, or grumpiness, please consider talking to a therapist about it. For some people, chronic anger can be a symptom of depression or another mental health condition. You're likely to need a therapist to help guide you into learning how to think differently about your situations so that you can make peace and not feel stuck in such a negative cycle. I don't know if there's any research on this, but I really do believe that carrying long-standing emotions like anger can be toxic to our physical health. I have seen the impact of anger on my own physical well-being. I notice that I tend to feel more physical pain and more fatigue and a variety of physical symptoms that I'm certain are not great for my immune system, and who knows what impact it can have long term. Use therapy to help you understand and release your emotions for peace of mind and long-term physical health. As we come to the end of this episode, as always, I'd love to hear from you. Do you struggle with chronic anger? Do you sometimes feel angry but get it confused with other emotions? What do you do when you feel angry to help calm yourself down? Reach out to Dr. Lori at drloribruce.com. And if you know someone who could benefit from listening to this episode, please consider sharing. Thank you for joining me today, and I will see you in the next episode.